Investors and automakers agree. The future is electric.
Electric cars are very much in America's future.
We still do believe in an all-electric future, and we're using this time to accelerate our work, and we believe let's get to all-electric vehicles as quickly as possible.
The popularity and success of Tesla has proven there's demand for electric cars. In the US, Tesla made up about 80% of electric car sales in 2019. And new competition continues to enter the market as more countries and states promote the use of EVs. Analysts predict record growth for EVs in 2021, especially in Europe and China. But in the US, electric vehicles are less than 2% of autos sold annually. Several hurdles remain for the market to really take off, and one of the biggest is charging.
The demand for EVs is not very high right now. And that's been one of the biggest discussions is how much infrastructure should we build out compared to the sales? Because everyone's planning for an EV future, but we're not even close to it being there yet.
And consumers know it. In one study, 83% of consumers who would not consider buying an EV said it was because of battery life and charging anxiety.
This is not a simple problem. Transitioning a whole transportation and energy set from petroleum-based all the way to electrification is not something that's going to happen overnight.
We wanted to explore the current state of electric charging and what needs to happen in order for electric vehicles to become mainstream. Electric cars are not a new idea, and were invented as far back as the 1830s. But it hasn't been until the last 20 years that electric vehicles, or EVs, have started to gain popularity, thanks in part to the advancements in battery technology and the push to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And when the all-electric Tesla Roadster came out in 2008, it changed people's perception on what electric cars could be and helped launch and accelerate more EV programs. But a lot of consumers still aren't making the transition.
Consumers are very set in their ways. You have to know how to plug them in. You have to know the range. You have to know what impacts your range so you don't run out of energy.
Last year, 143 new EVs launched across the globe. And by 2023, IHS predicts over 43 brands will offer an EV. The range of how far a car can drive on a single charge is improving, but still remains a concern for some buyers. Tesla's Model S leads the industry with a range of 402 miles, while other manufacturers can be anywhere from 100 to 250 miles per charge. And Lucid Motors' new EV sedan is expected to have a range of 517 miles.
Clearly the technology has its merits, and the remaining challenge relates ultimately to electric vehicle charging.
In 2019, 68% of EV owners said that there is not enough charging available around their home. There are over 88,000 charging outlets and roughly 27,000 charging stations, compared to the 156,000 gas stations in the US. According to the Breakthrough Institute, there is an anticipated need for 9.6 million EV chargers in the US by 2030. Not all charging stations are the same. Tesla chargers, for example, only work on Tesla vehicles, while most other companies are brand neutral and can charge any type of EV. There are three major types of charging. Level 1 and Level 2 are most common in homes, workplaces, and public charging areas. They charge between 2 to 20 miles of range per hour. DC fast charging, or Level 3, can deliver 60 to 80 miles of range in roughly 20 minutes. Not every EV on the market can handle this type of charge. As more cars come out, most are working towards higher voltage charging.
We're not going to charge electric vehicles in exactly the same way that we refill gasoline vehicles. The vast majority of electric vehicle charging so far does and will continue to take place at home. But of course, this isn't applicable for everyone. Not everyone has perhaps their own carport or their own garage in which to charge.
California is somewhat different. They have a lot of EV charging stations, which is why Tesla sells so well there. But I mean, in the heartland of America, anywhere else, it's very difficult to find an EV charging station.
Tesla has set a high bar when it comes to charging. Its supercharging network has created what Morgan Stanley referred to as a competitive moat over other EV charging companies. A majority of the DC fast chargers in the US are Tesla superchargers.
GM's philosophy They have not wanted to invest a lot of their own money to build out their own network. They've instead partnered with different EV charging startups or companies.
GM announced earlier this year that it plans to spend $20 billion through 2025 on its next generation all-electric and autonomous vehicles. It unveiled the Cadillac Lyriq, GMC's all-electric Hummer, and acquired an 11% stake in electric truck maker Nikola. But the company is also getting into charging. GM announced a partnership with EVgo in July to build more than 2,700 new fast chargers across the US in the next 5 years. GM and EVgo declined to announce how much it plans to invest.
When we're looking at strategies associated with bringing infrastructure to light, we really want to enable that infrastructure for all customers. And so part of that is also enabling a business model that works. And so partnering with a group like EVgo really helps us establish those business models where things like utilization, other aspects of the business can come to market.
Many automakers have decided to partner with private companies rather than take the route Tesla did and build out their own networks. Ionity is a joint venture made up of several automakers that aim to add more charging stations throughout Europe.
Other automakers are not necessarily going to follow the path that Tesla have taken, because it's quite unique, and it's certainly one that we should admire and learn from, the path that they've taken with the infrastructure that they've installed. I think what Tesla did great was they realized from the off that the high power fast charging capability on key routes was the bit that they would need to implement in order to convince potential consumers to buy a Tesla.
Other automakers are realizing having reliable, widely available infrastructure can help sell cars.
The bottom line is, if you want those vehicles in your backyard, you gotta have the charging. The infrastructure has to come first, and customers have to see that infrastructure to start to be comfortable with it.
Several key players have emerged to fill in the gaps across the US. ChargePoint says it has 115,000 charging points globally, most of them in the US. ChargePoint's investors include Daimler, BMW, and the venture arm of Chevron Corp, among others. It plans to create as many as 2.5 million chargers by 2025. Electrify America was created as part of Volkswagen's diesel emissions settlement with the US and California. As part of the settlement, it will spend $2 billion by the end of 2026.
We have 470 sites in operations right now. The distance that we have between the sites, it's already in average about 70 miles. And already today we have 96% of Americans, they actually live within 120 miles from our site. So we are young actually, but we are growing fast.
The company started with a focus in California and is now expanding throughout the US. It sees Tesla not as competition, but as an example of what its network could be.
Tesla is a reference for us in terms of charging experience. And the good news, we are working, with this company. We are building some sites together, and we are using Tesla batteries to mitigate the cost of the main chargers on our sites, 120 sites actually at the moment.
Several other companies in the space are taking different approaches. Volta, for example, uses its chargers for digital advertising, allowing users to recharge for free. There are also mobile charging companies like SparkCharge and FreeWire, whose business model is a portable approach. FreeWire has received investments from Volvo and BP. Envision is taking a solar approach, and even Shell is investing in the space.
The bigger oil and gas companies are getting into this space. BP, they've invested in a biggest UK network, ChargeMaster. We've seen the same with Shell. They've taken a significant stake in NewMotion in the Netherlands. I guess some of the investment in these companies at this stage is relatively minor, given the funds that these companies have. So it could be argued that they are making these investments to future-proof themselves, whether EVs thrive or not.
Developing infrastructure for electric charging is complex. Companies need to decide how much power they need, the kind of chargers they are going to install, and where to install them.
Do we need a charging station in every corner? I would say no, that we don't. And we don't need as many electric vehicle charging stations in the public domain as we've needed gas stations to date. Defining exactly how much we need is a huge challenge.
What's great and really neat about this industry is sort of matching charging times with the use case. Faster isn't always better, frankly speaking. When you can get out of the car, plug in at home at night, and go to bed and wake up with a full charge, much like your cell phone, you really can match the charging speed, the technology, and the experience together to really get at what you're trying to tackle, which is get that customer their range back as they need it. When we think about faster charging when you're out and about, maybe you live in an apartment building and you don't have access to charging overnight. So putting in charging at the grocery store, you're gonna wanna get most of that battery back in that 30 to 45-minute shopping trip.
Electrify America just finished building a cross-country route which gives users access to its DC fast chargers. The company says its primary focus is fast charging.
If you want to serve customers out there, to bring them on a charging station and back on the road, well, actually, I believe that you need to be fast.
In the US alone, McKinsey & Company projects it will cost as much as $11 billion to ensure public charging stations are as easily accessible as gas stations.
The biggest challenges for the charge point operators now are to continue the build out of their network and continue to put an increased amount of infrastructure in the ground whilst maintaining profitability. From their perspective, I think if you ask them what do they need EVs, but they also would like to see, of course, legislation from the governments to promote EV ownership.
Another challenge when building chargers, especially fast chargers, is how much power companies need to pull from the grid. A study by the U.S. Department of Energy found electric vehicles could raise national power consumption by 38% by 2050. The amount of energy needed affects the cost for the customer. To calculate the cost per mile of an EV depends on the battery type and the cost of energy. Energy costs are different from state to state, and therefore pricing may be less in Nevada and more in California. Residential and commercial rates also differ. Tesla charges 28 cents per kilowatt hour at most supercharger locations. At that rate, it would cost $21 to fully recharge a Model 3. Charging network pricing models are pay-as-you-go, monthly subscriptions, or in some cases free. They can charge by the minute or by kilowatt hour. Paying by kilowatt hour is similar to paying by the gallon in gas stations. California recently banned pay by minute, stating, "Time is not an acceptable unit of measure for dispensing and billing electricity as motor vehicle fuel." When it comes to charging infrastructure, the US lags behind Europe and China, where the government has made electric cars a huge priority. China recently announced it will spend almost 2.7 billion yuan on battery charging infrastructure.
We think that the US has somewhere in the region of 15,000 outlets for DC charging, at somewhere in the region of 4,000 locations. Compare this to China, who at the end of 2019 had somewhere in the region of 200,000 DC fast charge outlets, and that's expected to rise to 270,000 by the end of this year. That's a level of magnitude higher. Of course, the challenges are slightly different as well. A lot more people are living in the urban environment in China. That even less people will have the opportunity to charge domestically.
Electric charging infrastructure has grown quickly in the past 10 years and will continue to grow as vehicles' ranges, batteries, and charging capabilities continue to improve.
The capability and also the maturity of the network will evolve. So we're going to have energy services. You will be able to have a bi-directional communication between the cars and the network.
So the sun shines at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in California, and there's an overabundance of electricity because the sun's shining. How do we start to match that opportunity where we say, hey cars, start charging, the sun's here, and doing that in such a seamless way for customers where they've forgotten about their sort of charging behaviors. We're managing that with electric utilities in the background, and we're getting cheaper energy that's better for the grid and making it more efficient, as well as cleaner energy overall. So I think over time what you're going to see with charging is essentially it'll become such a seamless thing that most customers won't even have to think about it.
The question remains, even when we do add more charging infrastructure, can it boost electric vehicle sales and adoption?
Once we get to that level where the price is with gas or even lower, the range is with gas or even lower, I think that's really going to be an inflection point for consumers and people that aren't early adopters to come into the EV space.